Welcome. I'm Stacy Malone, the Executive Director of the Victim Rights Law Center. Thank you for joining us today for the VRLC's virtual panel, Not on the Menu, a conversation on sexual harassment. Panelists. I love restaurants. I love food. I do not love sexual harassment. So this is clearly a really important topic for the entire industry, and we're so honored to have our panelists with us today. And as you may know, the Victim Rights Law Center is the first nonprofit law center in the country solely focused on providing free legal assistance to sexual assault survivors. Last year, we helped over 1,000 survivors in Massachusetts and in Oregon stabilize their lives post-assault. And through our national training programs, we've trained thousands of professionals throughout the country to improve the national response to sexual violence. For more information about the VRLC, please check out our website at victimrights.org and definitely follow us on our social media, Victim Rights Law. We are so excited to bring our community together in this virtual space, although I wish we were in person. Thank you to the volunteers who serve on the VRLC's Young Leadership Council for organizing this event. And an enormous thank you to Golston and Stores for hosting us on their Zoom platform today. It is now my honor to introduce someone who I absolutely adore, and today's moderator, Carla Reeves. Carla is an attorney at Golston and Stores, and she focuses her practice on employment litigation and counseling and government and internal investigations. She also conducts workplace trainings related to discrimination, harassment, retaliation, and unconscious bias. Carla's pro bono work is extensive, and it includes providing employment advice to nonprofit organizations just like us, the VRLC. We are so thankful to Carla for the many ways she's supported the VRLC and survivors throughout the years. So please join me in welcoming and thanking today's moderator, Carla Reeves.
Thank you, Stacy. I want to start out by introducing our panelists for today's program. First up is Elle Simone, who has been dazzling the culinary world since 2006 and is the first African-American woman resident food stylist and test cook on America's Test Kitchen on PBS. Elle is also the creator of She Chef Incorporated, which is a professional networking organization for women chefs of color. Elle shares her passion by mentoring, teaching resource building, business consultation and business development, and most importantly, advocacy. Next, we have Tiffany Faison, who is a chef and restaurateur of Boston favorites like Sweet Cheeks, Tiger Mama, and Fool's Errand. Tiffany has made a name for herself nationwide for her dynamic personality and culinary prowess and fierce work ethic. After placing runner-up on Top Chef Season 1, Tiffany is now a judge on the Food Network's Chopped. Keep an eye out for her new restaurants, Dive Bar and Tenderonis. Sonia Landis is the co-founder of Machina Kitchen and Art Bar in New Hampshire. She's an active voice for her community and advocates for creating opportunities for artists to showcase their work and build healthy, mission-driven businesses. And last but not least is Stephanie Holt, who's a senior attorney at the Victim Rights Law Center. She represents rape and sexual assault survivors with a focus on employment law, privacy, safety, and criminal justice advocacy. Stephanie also manages the Victim Rights Law Center's statewide pro bono projects to ensure that survivors have access to necessary legal representation throughout Massachusetts. So thank you all for joining us for this panel. I want to start out with some questions for both Elle and Tiffany. And Elle, I want to direct the first question to you. If you take a look back over time at the issue of sex harassment in the industry, how has it transformed or impacted your career?
Well, first, I think I have to acknowledge that my entry into the culinary industry was not the norm, in that I started in a very safe and supportive environment. And so for me, coming out of that environment, which was more travel tourist cooking, I got into the land-based restaurant world and noticed that there were very different experiences happening there. There was lots of sexual harassment, lots of, workplace harassment in a variety of ways. And I think that, me coming in a naive way, was actually good because it made me much more passionate about like advocacy, awareness, you know, like paying attention to things that others don't see. You know, it made me become, you know, it helped to sharpen my eye for detail, right? Looking at the subtle things, the little things, you know, because it's very easy to catch like overt behaviors, but in the kitchen, sometimes it's those microaggressions that are much harder to pick up. And since I came into this industry being a former social worker, you know, I had a slightly more trained eye to be looking for the things that no one can see, you know, looking at the abuse that is not worn on the sleeve or on the surface, right? So I think for me, the change that I've seen is that people have become more aware of the fact that sexual harassment in the workplace really doesn't look like any one particular thing, you know, and it's not always directly at a person. I think we're realizing that feeling harassed in any kind of way can simply just be being in the room, you know. So I think for myself and She Chef and the people who are affiliated with She Chef, I think we make it our business to be not only watching out for the obvious things, but looking for the things that are a little bit more hidden, and being vocal about those things just as equally as we are about the things that, you know, can be, you know, witnessed immediately.
Thank you, Elle. Tiffany, what about your take on this? What, if any, impact has sexual harassment in the industry had on your career?
Well, conversely, I had a different experience than Elle. I was kind of raised in restaurants since I was 14. So I think, you know, I was indoctrinated into that being synonymous with restaurants in ways that I wasn't even aware of. From like being 14 years old and having a restaurant owner say, I didn't know you had such great legs, gross, to like just years and years of it. There was a time that, you know, I had to start to understand not only that there was obvious sexual harassment happening, that like cultures of it had been built. And there were, for many, many years in my career, there weren't restaurants where I could go and avoid it or find cultures that did not have it. And that also includes women own and run restaurants. It was just so prevalent and rampant for so long. I think for me, once I started running kitchens, it was just so unacceptable. I didn't want it in my kitchens. And that meant, you know, coming into a kitchen that was already established, that became, you know, first and foremost, we just don't do that. And, you know, it was a kitchen, frankly, full of people who had like been really good people. It's not like they were like horrendous, you know, people just out of jail, like, you know, for sexual assault. Like it wasn't like that. It was just like ignorance, frankly. It was just like this culture that people had been living in for so long, you know, guys goosing each other as they walk by and just stuff like that, that is not only harassment to each other, it's also communication. It's also a bubble built to keep women out. It's a culture that really has, in a lot of ways, been, I think, built to intimidate and to build hierarchical models that serve no one and ultimately keep women and people of color, queer people out of kitchens. I think we've been more conscious of it since. You know, and I say this to my team all the time, it's something that we have to be fastidious about, because if you let a little bit in, it's literally like having cockroaches in the building. Like once you see one, you have to call the Terminator. You have to it's 911. We have to get people out here. We have to talk about it. We have to uncover it, or else you're going to find another cockroach and then another, and all of a sudden they're in your walls and it's like full extermination. So it's kind of, it's being, you know, and I've been in situations where people have come to me and said, Chef, I think it's like a little bit too much. Like you're going out a little too hard. You should just relax. It's not that big of a deal. It is in fact that big of a deal, even when little things happen. So it's impacted like 100% how I have built my company. It also has entirely impacted how I've run my company. I have now parted with 2 different business partners because they have both been demeaning and not particularly appropriate with other people. One, just like young women, really gross generally. And most recently, one that decided they were going to sleep with someone that we hired. So it's not just sexual harassment, it's also making sure that people feel like they can come to work and it's an equal playing field. They can leave feeling accomplished, and that their work is what speaks for itself, not who they're engaged with during off hours. So it's, it's subtle and it's also overt, and it shows up in 1,000 different ways. And so it has informed and impacted my career greatly, to the point that like making a stand and making sure that that's the hill I die on has not been, there's no gray area, and it's been difficult. It's cost me a lot of money. It's cost me a lot of heartache. It's cost me a lot of time, but it is something that I would never, ever change in terms of how we function. Also to say, like, we're not perfect, right? Like, things happen, but when they do, it's like there's a cockroach in the room and we are going to take care of it and we are going to excavate entirely. So.
And Tiffany, I know you've written on these issues, not only about sex harassment, but more broadly, misogyny and the experience of being a woman in a professional kitchen. What was it that prompted you to write about it when you did?
It was just after Mario Batali got like called out and canceled. I hate using the word canceled, but I'm sorry, held accountable and lost his career, deservedly so. Let's put it that way. And I was so frustrated with the sort of media swarm of, well, what are we going to do without Batali? There's this great void, and oh my God, what will we do? He was a god and a talent. And it's like, oh my God, there's so many people that are like as talented, if not more. You have just not given them the platform. So like this media monster that had created safe space for him, allowed this literal monster that everyone knew in the industry was a monster to have success and to operate with impunity. They were now the people that were like clutching their pearls, like, what are we going to do? Like, who's next? And it's like, there's all these like incredible people who are super talented that have not been like 4-star abusers for their entire career. And it's still, and that frustrated me. And, I started talking with Eater, frankly, about writing something. And that kind of coincided with me. The expectation of a woman is that I have to be great as a chef, be great as a restaurateur, but I also have to be not just selling food, beverage, service, and nice environment. I need to be selling nice all the time. And quite frankly, I got tired of selling nice. So not that anyone ever thought I was selling nice, but I wanted to speak to the fact that I don't think women should have to like sell nice as their brand all the time. So that was a accumulation of those things that I was just like, you know what, it's time to talk.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I know, Elle, both you and Tiffany have made some references to, the culture within the industry, although you both had different backgrounds and experiences within the industry. We hear a lot about, some kitchens feeling like boys' clubs and being spaces where behaviors like sexual harassment and other forms of sexual misconduct are just considered part of the job by some. And, in addition to the issues that Elle, both you and Tiffany have raised, I think, some of these dynamics are exacerbated by things like unusual work hours and also the pressures that are associated with being in a service industry where you're out and your goal is to make sure that you are really emphasizing, all it takes to please customers. And there's the dynamic of tips and the need for people to work to get better shifts. Elle, do you think that these issues are getting more attention in the wake of the Me Too movement?
Obviously, anytime a movement happens, you start to unearth, a lot of things that are happening. But I think that it probably didn't move fast enough, in my opinion, and I completely understand why, like women who are already the minority and usually in a lot of intersectional categories in the kitchen, right? Like, obviously gender, usually race, and then it could also be how that they identify in other ways. They don't want to take extra risk, to out themselves or others, or out there, be open about their experiences, because they feel like they already have so many other cards stacked against them that if they do this thing, which would be, holding someone publicly accountable for their actions and the behaviors, would they get blackballed? Would they Would this diminish their opportunities to advance in the kitchen? How, will people still have respect for them? Will they see them as vulnerable, or will people not respect them because you've called out their, the leader of the boys club? Like the women who held Mario Batali accountable. Some of them have not yet recovered their career in the ways in which it was prior to calling them out. And so I think it was definitely something that was part of the conversation before the Me Too movement. But like, when you're underrepresented in an industry, the last thing you really want to do is rock the boat, because when you're in a boys club environment, it's also usually like a you and then. So if you're in a male dominated kitchen, most of them are probably going to take up for each other, and so then you're wondering about who's going to believe you, and then and really, when you start to dig even deeper and you start to talk about socioeconomic status, we're talking about people who are afraid to lose their jobs because they need the money, right? So I don't know that I would say that the Me Too movement was necessarily the catalyst for the truth coming out, because I think a lot of people already knew. I think it was something that we just call simply power in numbers, where a lot of people with shared experiences just decided to get together and support each other in bringing this filth to light, right? And I'm grateful for it, but I still think that, in my opinion, there are some parts of that movement that really didn't. I don't feel they really were prepared for what would come after that, like how to protect the women after all of this, I know a few of these women personally, and they still have emotional, there's still lots of collateral damage from it, and I think I would have loved to see any movement help to deal with what comes after you have openly stated that you are a victim, and also made an open account to who your abuser, attacker, filling the adjective is, I don't think there was a plan for what comes after that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting point. So things like, tools and strategies for protection against retaliation, or raising awareness to what happens after a report is made or someone comes forward, and also keeping people on track in terms of their careers after they've taken this bold step in the direction of exposing what's happening in the industry. And that's a really good point.
I'm sorry, Carla, to say me, but the culinary industry is definitely like a high status industry, right? Like if you are affiliated with a top name, like that does something for your career, but if you have to be the person to say that said top name person is a monster, like it doesn't, there was nothing in place to say, like after you do this, you're now safe, like not that, I don't know that safety can be absolutely guaranteed, but it's incentive.
It's a soft place to land. Like, how do you land?
Right. How do you land? For sure. That probably would have been good, because having everything that you worked so hard for and then also endured abuse over completely snatched away from you is devastating. And those of us who are in the food world, like, I'm not going to say all we know is food, because a lot of us have lots of other talent, but we're in it usually because we're deeply passionate about it and we love it. And the last thing we want to do is have it stripped away, along with our dignity and our pride and our safety, feeling good in our bodies. Once that's taken away from you, I can't even begin to imagine how long it takes to rebuild from that. And and I don't need to, in order to be proactive about fixing it. I don't need to have that lived experience, because I believe those who had it. So yeah.
Oh, thank you. And Tiffany, I want to get your insight on this issue. Have you noticed any improvements in the industry in the wake of the Me Too movement, or have things remained the same from your perspective?
I mean, I think Elle really hit a lot of points around this that were so, astute. Like where is the place to land for people that are brave enough to stand up and like, make waves and say their truth. So I think that's huge. For me, I think there was, it was a study in structural sexism and misogyny, right? Like at some point there was like this, a bit of a rising, and it was gaining momentum, and there was like a whole like Hollywood, even it was like Time's Up Hollywood, Harvey Weinstein stuff. And then on a localized level, I thought, okay, here we go, right? Like, so it's happened at this sort of very national public way. These people that really no one ever thought would be able to be taken down, like really, like, forgive the term kingpins, but like these people, I thought, oh, for sure this will clear a path for like media, obviously, and I hate to keep putting this back on media, but really like it's very hard for us to like, what are we going to do? Like Elle and I and every like female chef together are going to get together and sign like something that say, hey, these are the abusers that we know in Boston and no one's touched them. Like our local media knows exactly who they are. They've had conversations with all of us. They've done nothing. Like how could it possibly be true that we live in a city where there are no abusers, guys? Like we're good. It's not possible. Right. So we're not holding people to account. So, that sort of second wave of like, okay, like here it comes. We're going to have this on a more localized level. We're going to be able to like speak freely and hold people to account. And it's shocking to people, right? Like things that we know in the industry are very shocking to like the average diner out who accepts these people as like good guys who are like, doing great things for like No Kid Hungry and riding bikes for cancer. And like, they don't stand up and like show their monster face. They assimilate into like the community in ways that are very acceptable for diners and considered good people. So no, there hasn't been enough, right? And because of that, there's a new and young group of chefs and of people that want to work in the industry that find themselves in those restaurants. And here we go again, perpetuating the abuse. And I genuinely am someone who believes unless there are very, very like negative and life-changing consequences, nothing changes. I mean, if you look at, for instance, I'll just say John Besh in New Orleans, like there was a huge story. He was one of the biggest abusers called out. 20-something women went on record. If that's who went on record, there were more. That man still operates almost all of his restaurants, has government contracts. He just doesn't show up in his restaurants anymore. That's the consequence. Do you think anything in that company culture changed? No. So here we are, like we can say this is the abuse, but unless the public joins us and refuses to spend their money in these spaces, it goes nowhere and they stay open and the abuse perpetuates itself. And, to Elle's point, I think if you are a woman or specifically a woman that's experiencing any sort of intersectionality, like women of color, queer women, people that are immigrants, maybe you're non-English speaking, that becomes that much harder to get away from and to get yourself safe and to communicate, this is not a place where I want to be. I will say, not that I believe it's easy for everyone, but this is when I tell you, like we were sort of, everyone knows this right now, we're speaking about this a little bit before the Zoom, this is an employee's market right now, in a way that I have never seen it ever before. So I implore women and anyone out there, women, queer people, people of color, anyone that's experiencing any kind of abuse that doesn't feel good to you, get out and go somewhere else. You can go find another job doing exactly what you're doing right now. I promise you. Even if you are like the culinary director of a group like this, I promise you there's another job out there that will appreciate you, not hurt you, and pay you more. Go find it right now.
I want to pick up on that topic and the current state of restaurants and the lifting of restrictions in most states. For the restaurants that have been able to survive the pandemic, we're anticipating a very busy summer, and we're seeing some of that already. Do you have any concerns about how this dynamic and the current state of the economy or the market might impact the culture in restaurants?
I'll start. Yes. I think there are people for whom employment is really, obviously employment is necessary to our economic survival and our health. And so getting in a busy restaurant and working in a place, whether you're a tipped employee or whether you're back of the house, that's busy is helpful. That provides job security. That also, we're all struggling with finding staff and staffing our restaurants. So everyone's kind of most people that are there are working more hours than they should be working. They're working a ton of overtime. They're probably being put in situations that are not great. We're trying to make a conscious effort in my company to kind of open slowly. I know there's tons of money out there to go grab. It's more important to me that everyone feels safe and that we don't feel like we're getting crushed every night. I think there's a propensity for the general public to come, and I've seen them do it already, just like barging in. It's party time, zero respect for like the people that are, I really naively felt like, oh, people are going to come in and be like so grateful for restaurants and so happy to see us and like so kind. And that has happened a little bit, but for the most part, it's been this like almost entitled like rush into restaurants. Like we've never dealt with some of the levels of like entitlement and anger that we're dealing with right now. And I know it's not about us, but we also shouldn't have to take it. So, you know, I think that that's something we need to be really conscious of as leaders in this industry right now and as owners, that we are able and willing to put ourselves in between the abuse of whatever guest is happening and our team. We say this all the time. If there's ever, people can come in cranky, that's fine, but you cannot in any way demean, put down, be cruel, disrespect our team. Like we never need that money, get out. And it's important, I think, that leaders in restaurants have a mindset that is exactly that. Like you cannot in any way disrespect my team. You are out. You can come in cranky. It's our job to turn that around. But like, you know, at some point it can't be cruel or disrespectful or racist or homophobic or sexist or transphobic, any of that, none.
So you just referenced some really great examples of ways to intervene as a leader in this space as things are happening or as people raise concerns. Elle, I want to get your take on this. Do you have any approaches that you think are especially effective in terms of interrupting, interactions where people might be crossing the line or making others feel uncomfortable, or maybe even, getting people to understand the seriousness of even the subtle behaviors that are crossing boundaries with people who are working in the industry? Do you have any, thoughts on what strategies might be effective for people who do want to lead in this space and try to help out in the moment?
I don't know if I'm the best person to ask, because the moment that I lose my tact is when I have to confront a situation. I don't think that I don't personally believe that there's any soft approach to it. Like I am just naturally, by nature, I'm pretty outspoken, right? So I definitely am even less so when I see that someone is feeling uncomfortable or someone is being harassed. It might even be probably unsafe how fearless I am about dealing with those situations immediately. I don't intend to make an abuser feel comfortable. It's just not my plan. In fact, I'm trying to embarrass you more than I can embarrass anyone on the planet. I'm going to call you out, and show you some correction. I feel like it's just the kind of job that's just, it's not for the meek, and not to say that if you are a quiet person or a more subdued person, that there's no role or need for you. Perhaps I think people should find an approach that matches their personality, right? I think all advocacy is good advocacy. I think that if social media is your bag, and that's where people listen to you, if that's the platform that actually gets the most ears for you, then you should use that tool, right? I think you should just kind of be working within your, the range of your personality and where your voice echoes the furthest, right? I'm on television, I'm on camera a lot. So just like being outspoken and saying what I think is what comes natural to me. So that is my approach. But I just urge people to find what approach works for them. For some people, it might be organizational advocacy work. We need people there. Sometimes it's educating, victims on, how to have their needs met. Like find what works for you, because I think there's just as much a need to be supporting the victims in a variety of ways as there is to need to confront the abusers, right? Like I think there could be more balance in that, right? Like we can call people out, but we can also empower people to feel confident enough to say something for themselves. You know, like the very first time someone said something out of the way to me, you know, I immediately asked them, what did you say? Repeat that. What does that mean? You know, like there are tactics to get people to like really stop and think about what they're saying and confront them in a non-confrontational way, right? Those are definitely some tactics that I use, but like everyone, you know, doesn't feel strong coming in. What do they call it? Off the ropes. You know, I'm an off the ropes kind of person, but find what matches you, what works for you, what makes you feel safe, and what makes you feel empowered.
I'll interject really quickly if I can, and I agree with with Elle. In different experiences and different situations, you can certainly match someone with like what you feel is appropriate. In restaurants specifically, when we're like in service and someone does something, it's really important for me to de-escalate the situation. I don't want to fight. I just want them to leave, right? And I also need to protect the person for whom this happened to. So what I don't want to do is create something where like they're further embarrassed or they feel like it's their fault, or, we sort of have to say, these are the situations. If you ever feel uncomfortable, come talk to us and let us know. They know that their managers are going to back them up. And then we're going to get to like what it is. And if there's something that's kind of like gray area, like we'll go talk to the guest. If it's like an absolute you're gone kind of situation, we will just like, they don't even have to pay for their food, just get gone. Like, and we'll sort of just ask them, go over, usually like talk to the person who's been, perpetrating whatever insult, violence, whatever, touching, whatever it might be. If there's violence, they're just out. We literally will drag them out by their ears. But if whatever's happening, we'll pull them aside and talk to them and say, look, this is totally unacceptable. We've got your meal tonight. Please don't come back. This is what happened. And 9 times out of 10, that happens all the time. It really doesn't. Because I do think the fish rots from the head down. Like, I think stuff like that happens in spaces in restaurants where people know that it's not necessarily owned by people. They know that not everyone who comes to my restaurants know that they're mine, but most people know that behavior is not allowed in my restaurant. So we deal with it less than we used to as I was sort of coming up. But, it is important to kind of de-escalate the situation. That's not giving the abuser a pass. That's making sure that we're protecting the victim.
Thank you. Danya, I want to get your take on this. Are there methods of combating or, interrupting sexual harassment in the workplace that you found to be, especially effective?
Yeah, so our restaurant we just passed our 2-year mark, just to kind of preface that. So we're pretty new, and people go, oh, you must have this must be your dream. And actually owning a restaurant was never my dream. I fell into this industry, and I started when I was 14 working at a pizza shop and had my own experiences. So coming back to it as an adult, it was really scary for me as a woman restaurateur to go into this industry not having a plan of how to deal with sexual harassment and mitigate that. We really started from our own experiences and started from the bottom up. But one thing that we found that's very effective in our restaurant in regarding to guests and tables is that we found a color-coded system that originated from a restaurant in California called Home Base. They're a certified B Corp, so they're socially responsible. We also are a socially responsible restaurant as well. And this color-coded system is a really easy, simple way for my employees to be able to tell us what's going on without having to explain. Some people have trauma, some people have just different triggers in life, and they just can't, it's not all the time that they need to sit down and tell you about every last little thing. So this is a very quick, easy way. It goes from yellow to orange to red. Yellow is just, if you're getting a creepy vibe from the table, and you can tell your manager that, and they can either, you can ask your manager to take that table, or that manager will just keep an eye out on you. Orange is that it's something borderline, you really, that they made a comment that was really not okay. You feel very uncomfortable, and the manager just takes over the table immediately. But that comment may not be something that you can just kick that person out immediately for doing that. Red is we immediately ask that person to leave. That table is not allowed to be there anymore, and they did not treat that person correctly. That, if someone touched you, if someone said a very like overt comment to you, like they just leave. That's not okay. So this is a really easy way where someone can, they can sit down and have a conversation with you and tell you, yes, okay, this is what's happening to me. Or they can make the choice not to do that, and they can just be removed immediately from that situation whatsoever. So we have tried really hard. We have people who are transgender, non-binary. We have people who work in our restaurant who just, we want to make sure that each individual, each guest, each employee is taken care of and welcomed, feels like a human. We talk about approaching tables with non-gender pronouns. And making sure that we are really careful about, welcoming everyone. And this has only been used once, by the way, which makes me really happy. It's like an insurance plan, right? So like you have it, if something goes wrong, you can use it. But it was used once, and it was very effective when it was used. So I'm glad.
Yeah, so I want to touch on one of the questions that we received from one of the attendees, because I think it relates to this in an interesting way. In a restaurant that's using a system like what Danya just described, there's a visible indicator, and also, just the way that people are approaching their work and communicating that sets the tone for what the expectations are with respect to that culture. We received a question, how do you know which restaurants to support and which ones you shouldn't? So maybe there are some that are using systems like the example Danya just gave, but how do you know about others, especially if, there isn't media attention or, blogging about experiences that people are having? How else can people determine which of those restaurants they need to avoid?
Well, I'm
go
sorry.
for it, Elle. No, go.
I was going to say, when I first moved here, this is the Elle and Tiffany story. When I first moved to Boston, I didn't really know a lot about like Boston restaurateurs, right? Like I'm from New York. It's its own little bubble. That's all I really knew. And so I had gone out for drinks with some coworkers after work, and I went to a restaurant of a known abuser unknowingly, right? So I was, just posting pictures with my friends, like they're only about, at that time, there were only like 3 Black women who worked at ATK. And we were just happy to spend time with each other outside of work. And so Tiffany sent me a text, and she was like, "Oh, honey, don't go there. Like that dude's no, don't go there." And I think it's just really important to like have friends, right? Like get to know people in your community, including the restaurateurs. Like it's very important to know who's in your neighborhood. Just like we have registries for sex offenders, have your own mental registry of like what restaurants are in your community. And the more you know the owners, the chefs, the people who work there, you'll know what's going on in the building. Like you'll get word of it. But it was helpful for me to just, have friends in the community who knew what was going on even when I didn't, so that I could, and with that, it brought me to a place where I had to be accountable. Like, you know what, guys? I went to a place I didn't know, who I was dealing with. I put this on my social media, and I'm a public figure. I have to immediately address it, and I have to be apologetic and acknowledge that my action may have triggered a victim, even though it was just cocktails, like it was a huge moment for me. And it really was like, it was a real shaking to let me know that I have to just be aware. Like I got to do my homework. I can't just go and plop my hind parts in a seat at a bar and think that everything is okay. I need to know with whom I'm spending my money, with whom I'm spending my time, and who I'm affiliating my own name with, right? Like that was an important move for me. So I say just know who's in your community, know who's taking up space, who's taking money from your community, what kind of people are you giving your money to? That's really important.
It's tough, right? Because I'm not in a position where I can say, hey, these are the people, right? I can't do it without them coming after me. So, and I know it's like, I wish I was in a space where I could do that. And there's very specific reasons about why I can't do that I actually can't talk about. So, so it's interesting. What I would do is like, you know, as you're keeping, I don't know if people have this, but I do. I have a list of like restaurants on my notes in like every city that I want to try, that are new or that are whatever. And you know, I have a pretty good, we know who most of the abusers are, but there's also people we don't know. One of the things I'll start to do, you see these like interviews with chefs all the time about where they like to go and what restaurants they like to go to. Pick out some of the female chefs that have been around for a good long time and kind of cross section like where they like to go. And none of those abusers are going to be on that list. I promise you that. So, and start to like take note of some of the major restaurants in major cities that would be on everyone's list that are not on those lists.
So we are pretty vocal that we're a socially responsible restaurant. We have that on our website. We talk about the way that we treat our employees. We won one of the best places to work for in the nation in 2020. We're trying to be a B Corp. There are a lot of people like us who are interested in having these conversations, and doing your research is the key to that. It's just checking out their websites. And I agree. I make a list of, if I see like socially responsible restaurants or people who are doing great things for the world, and I always want to go there. I want to talk to those people. I want to see them. I want to know what they're doing. And collaboration is key. And it's also figuring out what other people are doing to help their employees or help their staff and their guests learn what this industry needs to look like going forward. I
will also, sorry, go ahead.
No. Yeah, go ahead.
I will say this just like as a quick pin in it. If you find any restaurants where you have a very hard time getting a reservation, like you have to plan months out and there's like maybe 50 people working in the kitchen and there's like maybe 40 seats, like that's a pretty good indication that people aren't being paid. It's a good indication that people are certainly not being paid well. It's a good indication that there's some level of abuse happening in that kitchen. I'll start there. And I'm not saying all fine dining, but a significant chunk of very fine dining. And that's not the only people that I'm talking about, but I would start there. And then if you see people that have trained under those people and have similar restaurants with similar sort of like feels to them, know that they're probably perpetuating the same stuff.
Yeah, and talking on that too, I think language, when you're in a restaurant, if you hear language like derogatory terms towards individuals, like calling people a waitress is not really an acceptable thing anymore. If you hear that they're calling them a server or giving them the level of professionalism that they deserve, that you can tell whether or not they're being treated correctly. We call our dishwashers porters because we feel like dishwashers are an incredibly important job, but it's incredibly underrated. And so it's something that we want to make sure that they feel like they are valid and important to the team and not just, the dishwasher in the corner kind of situation.
I think the only thing I'll add is that it sounds like, because communication and just sharing of experiences is so key, when you hear about different restaurants that are doing it right, or that leave people with the sense that, hey, I felt good about the culture that I observed, then, sharing that information as well and coming up with those lists of places that seem to have figured out how to build a healthy culture and support the people who are helping to keep the business running. I think that's great. Good. So Stephanie, I want to make sure we also, hear about your perspective on these issues and your take, especially given all the work that you do with respect to supporting survivors in cases that involve sexual harassment and sexual assault. Can you talk to us about the different types of support the Victim Rights Law Center offers to individuals who are navigating these issues?
Sure. So I think a lot of what we do, everything we do is client directed. And as an attorney, I think my job is really to tell the victim like what they should be expecting at work, like what their rights are, if their rights have been violated, and letting them know what their options may be. So in an employment law context, what we're frequently looking at is situations where, let's say we have someone who's being harassed by a client at a restaurant, making sure that if they aren't in a restaurant like Tiffany's or Danya's, that they are aware that that's not an acceptable situation, because a lot of our clients are on the younger end. It's maybe one of their first jobs. They may have just grown up in the restaurant industry. They don't know that that's not appropriate behavior, or they know, I don't feel comfortable with it, but the customer's always right. I'm not trying to get fired. I'm paycheck to paycheck. What am I supposed to do here? A lot of our clients are also immigrants who maybe they don't have their work permit. They're concerned about reporting sexual harassment or a sexual assault because they're scared of what that's going to do to their status. They're scared about, how am I supposed to support my family? Am I going to be deported if I report this? What kind of options do I have in that situation? So we make sure to advise them on that. And then for people who do want to come forward, Ella mentioned this concern about being blackballed in their industry, right? That's a real fear, and that's a real problem. So we do what we can to make sure things stay private to whatever degree possible. Make sure that if that client wants to leave that particular restaurant, that we can do it in the safest way possible, where they're kind of maximizing, what money can they get out of that? Can we get a settlement agreement out of that situation? Can we get a good recommendation from that former boss? And can they just get out safely if that's what they want to do? If they want to go on unemployment, and maybe they've been constructively discharged. It's a situation where, the employers kind of made that situation untenable for them to remain in that current employment. What do we do to make sure that they can still get on unemployment, even though they technically quit their job, even though that wasn't a job where they were supported? And then from there, especially when we're looking at assault, we support them past that point. I think Elle and Tiffany both brought up, sometimes people come out, they say something against their boss or whoever it was who was harassing them. And then they find that they have, they are having issues further down the line, whether that be mental health. Maybe they go to their next job and it's hard for them to work certain shifts. It's hard for them to be in that situation. What accommodations can we get for them at that next position? If it's a sexual assault situation, what criminal justice support do they need? Do they have other needs like housing, immigration, education, whatever that is? We try to support them going forward, because the real goal here is to help make that victim's life whole again, and to ensure, that moving forward in the restaurant industry or whatever industry they want to be in, that they have options, and then they know what those options are and can really just move forward with that employment.
Stephanie, can you also touch on the difference between the legal process for cases involving sex harassment as opposed to cases involving sexual assault?
Sure. So in the workplace context, there isn't a huge difference. I would say sexual assault and harassment are kind of on a continuum. So I don't want to say low end of sexual harassment. I just don't have a better word for it right now. But when you're looking at lewd comments, problematic, just talking to someone in a problematic way, making sexualized comments, that's one end of sexual harassment. The far end is something like a groping or a forcible touching, rape. And it's kind of just all in this continuum as far as if you're looking at a complaint under Title VII with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So it's so incredibly broad. So everything from verbal to physical can count as sexual harassment in a way. And so, the processes are similar or the same in that particular context. I think that it's important for any employer to keep in mind that someone who starts off just making lewd comments, or if you allow a culture of that will escalate over time. I have so many clients who start in a workplace situation where it starts with those, inappropriate comments and then escalates, and suddenly they're being groped by someone or they're being raped because, you've fostered an environment where that feels like an acceptable situation, which is really disturbing. Now, in a criminal context, sexual harassment and sexual assault are not comparable at all. They are not on the same continuum. Sexual harassment, even if there's been a sexual harassment situation at a workplace where it's gotten to the point where that person who's harassing has gotten fired, that may not have risen to the level of, say, criminal harassment. So it may not be a criminal offense in any way. Whereas sexual assault, a forced touching without someone's consent, that's always going to be a criminal offense.
And Stephanie, do you think the current laws on harassment in the workplace are fair and adequate, or would you suggest that changes be made?
I wish we were in person because, I mean, Carla, I know you will have feelings on this too, and no, they're not adequate. And I could talk for the next, hour on that, but no one wants to hear from me from an hour. So I will say that, no, they're not adequate. And I think one thing that really bothers me as someone who works with victims of rape and sexual assault is that the statute of limitations for filing a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is 180 days. There's state law equivalents that can bump that up to 300 days. That is such little time. Most victims of rape or sexual assault within a year of assault are experiencing depression, anxiety, PTSD, going through possibly losing a job, trying to file for unemployment, dealing with housing issues, dealing with all kinds of other issues over the course of that 300 days, and then being expected to find time to find a lawyer, find out what your rights are, find out what should have been happening in that situation, and trying to file a suit. It's unreasonable, completely unreasonable, and so unfair to people who are put in that situation. So that's just one area where I think the laws are just really deficient. I think there needs to be a longer statute of limitations for people who've been through this.
I think the one thing I'll add, and this is not so much directed at the law as it is policies, there's a lot of work that can be done on internal policies as well to ensure that, first of all, they're clear and, they're setting expectations and helping leadership really set the tone for the cultures that they want to promote, and also that they're effective. People have clear information about where they can go to report incidents of misconduct, information about resources for people who they can talk to, and some assurance that the process will work. So I think in addition to looking at laws and the ways that those can evolve over time, I think the internal policies also need work, because that's where a lot of these discussions are starting within the actual restaurants before people are pushed to the point of seeking external assistance. So I want to also throw out some questions for the entire group. And what I'll do is start with Danya. Danya, you mentioned that you've been up and running for a couple of years. I'd be really interested in hearing from you about different strategies that you might recommend for maybe people who are in your shoes, just starting out or thinking about venturing out into the restaurant industry. How do you go about creating the types of cultures, that will make clear to people that behaviors like harassment and assault will not be tolerated and are not supported in your space?
Yeah, so we have a team of 6 owners, just so you kind of have a lay of the land. So 6 owners, 3 of us are majority owners, and 2 of us work day to day. It's me and my male business partner, who's the chef. So we, as a team, got together and started talking about this from pretty much day one of knowing that we were going to be opening, and saying, how do we make sure that we have the culture that we want, and that people are hired as a mission fit to connect with that culture. And so that's the first thing we do, is during hiring, we don't ask about sexual harassment, but we ask enough questions to know what that person's intention is and why they're here. We much rather hire someone with 0 experience, although it'd be great, to have experience, that we can train and who will be a kind and considerate person, than, hire someone who is not. We, start at the bottom. So there's the first and foremost thing is building trust with your employees and having them know that you're there for them, that you'd go to bat for them, and that you're there to listen, and they're not going to be pushed aside if they say that, like, oh, this person made a comment, and you go, it's fine, don't worry about them. We would never do that. They need to know that they are valid in their, and I'm happy that they can come to me and feel like that's a safe space. That's, I think, the number one thing. The next thing that we did was there's no divide between our front of house and back of house. That is just not something that we tolerate. That has been a problem with sexual harassment of like the front and back of house before, and we are very encouraging that we work as a full team. at all times. So the back of house is never allowed to get mad at the front of house if they ask for accommodations with food. And our managers are 100% on board with that as a sentiment as well. So we actually physically took the doors off of our kitchen so that they feel like they're in one space together as well. And they have meetings together every day and talk about whatever they need. So that was another tactic that we did that worked pretty well. As I said, we put in that color-coded system, and then we do small things like making sure that we're talking about how to approach tables with non-gender, how to talk about sexual harassment, how to make sure that if somebody is doing something wrong, that you know where to go get backup. I still think that servers tend to not, or bartenders tend to not want to like make waves or complain. So it's difficult sometimes because you want to help them. And if they don't say anything, it's you don't know that that's happening. And making sure that you're paying attention to that and making sure that you're backing them up is 100% the most important thing, and saying, okay, this is not okay. No one can treat you like this. In my experience, which is, it sounds funny, I'm an artist, so I'm using this as an example, but it's Marina Abrevich did this beautiful art piece called Rhythm Zero, and she laid out 72 different objects over a period of 6 hours. She just stayed still, and she allowed any of the viewers to do anything to her with these objects, and they lost sight of the fact that she was a person. She had no humanism. She was just an object to them at that point. And I do feel like sometimes in the restaurant industry, we're so much in the background, or the servers do such a good job that people forget that they're people. And so trying to remind them of that and have our guests interact with our staff in a way that is personal, and they feel like they come in, they know when their birthday is, they know what their favorite drink is, they know, you went to the Caribbean last week, just little things that they remember, and they form relationships with each guest that comes in a way that it feels more like they're intertwined and that they're people and not just objects. So that's something that we've been very encouraging of as well. But it's hard, especially with alcohol involved. We have a bar and it's a cocktail bar, and people don't always behave when after they have a couple drinks. And so just making sure that we're trying to be really careful about how we deal with those situations as a whole.
Tiffany, from your perspective, what role can patrons have in efforts to, prevent sexual harassment in the restaurant industry? Oh, you're on mute.
I mean, generally they cannot be jerks. I mean, I think Donnie hit it really hard. Just like, I think come out with the intention to have a good time. It comes down to just, we say this all the time. We don't live in the like customer is always right thing. We have our core values, and one of them is hospitality goes both ways. Like, it is our job to provide an incredible experience for you, to have you leave on cloud 9 where you can't wait to come back. You owe us too on the way in, and you don't owe us much, but you just owe us the respect that we are people. We are working a job. We are here to really be the conduits and advocates for you to have a good time. You need to be the conduits and advocates for us to be respected, and that's very, very basic. But that's important, and I think it's hard to, it's. Even if you put a sign on the door that says the expectation is respect, it's not going to matter to the people who are going to blow past that sign, not even going to read it, come in and just stomp all over everything. You're going to have those people sometime. Not everyone was raised well, and people were raised hurt people. Some people just want to come in. A lot of people need attention, and if it manifests in that way, in an abusive way, they're gone. But if it's just everything's wrong all the time. Like, we'll deal with that. That's fine. So there's not a ton that you can do in terms of, but for having conversations like this, where we are able to like really meet people where we're at before they even walk in the restaurant and say, hey, it's important that you don't have to be on your like, start shirt best behavior. You just have to not be a jerk. But I also think it's important that to build a culture where people feel safe and feel comfortable coming to us, it's not just saying, hey, we'll back you up. It's also important that we create an environment and we do this where everyone on the team backs each other up, where like one person might accept that for themselves and another person sees it and says that is not okay. Like, even if you are okay with, or not okay, if you don't feel good about saying something, I'm going to say something on your behalf. Like, we just don't do that here. So and the other side of that is like not just what we don't accept, it's what we do accept. We light each other up, we compliment each other, we like, it's important to like build a team that relies on each other, has each other's backs, knows each other personally and professionally, and understands and respects the talent that everyone brings to the table. And it's really the want to protect the team and the talent that allows us to have a space where people can really call out when they feel they're being disrespected or something's happening that they want to address.
Yeah, and going off of that, Tiffany, so we have a saying in our restaurant, we enforce a team mentality with individual responsibility. So that means like we're all working as a team, but if you see something, you take the responsibility to help or do it yourself as well. So it's working as a team, and also the divide between servers and them knowing that they can all work together and help each other throughout the evening, and they're not, in their little sections ignoring each other. And so they see what is happening and they're there for one another.
Unfortunately, we're at time. I feel like we could continue this discussion. This has been very informative and really interesting. So thank you all for taking the time to participate in this panel. I want to hand it over to Stacy to close out the program.
Thank you all so much. I had goosebumps as you were talking. Thank goodness I was